The prayer this evening is one given by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. at the National Democratic Convention in Chicago in 1956. O God, our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for the privilege of assembling here today. We thank Thee for all the opportunities of life, and as we stand together and discuss vital matters confronting our nation and confronting the world, we ask Thy guidance be with us in all our deliberations, and help us at all times to seek to do those things which are high, noble, and good, and to make our nation a great nation, a nation that follows all the noble precepts of the Christian religion and all of the noble precepts of democracy. Grant, O God, that as we move on, we will move towards that city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Amen.
Thank you, Dan. With that, I will call the meeting to order. This is our Monday, July 13th, Washougal City Council meeting. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Boger.
Here.
Councilmember Wagner. Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel.
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Council members Wagner and Freeman let us know that they would not be in attendance this evening.
Mr. Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that council members Wagner and Freeman be excused.
Hearing no objections, so ordered. Are there any amendments to the agenda this evening? Okay. Hearing none, we're at that first opportunity in the agenda, actually 3 opportunities in the agenda this evening for any members of the public that would like to address council. We do have, I'm assuming that a lot of folks are here for the sewer cost of service public hearing, so if we could hold those comments until we actually have that public hearing would be helpful, but if you cannot stay for the meeting, you can certainly speak up during this time as well. Good evening, Harvey.
Mayor, council members, Harvey Olson, 3903 R Street. This is the 4th time I'm going to talk on the same subject, Mayor, and thank you for the red light. Recently, the city sent households a mail out to reduce water consumption. More recently, Mayor, you were quoted in the Columbian newspaper saying Washougal citizens should reduce water usage, such as lawn watering for even house numbers to alternate watering days with odd-numbered houses. This is stage 2 of chapter 13.14, water conservation, voluntary conservation. I think this is my 4th time to say there isn't any incentive for residents that use less than 9 units, used to be 10, of water in a billing cycle to conserve water, because they get charged for 9 units regardless of how many units less than 9 are used. Mayor, if you were sincere making our comments for Washougal residents to conserve water, I have a suggestion that would give water usage the best reason to conserve. It's called money. Suggestion: for the duration of the statewide drought emergency, to reduce water usage, the city of Washougal will bill each account only for the units of water used in each billing cycle. I'm sure, well, that's, I could go on in a lot of other areas, but that will suffice. We could go back to the way it used to be before the 10 units was put in. You were charged for only the units used in the billing cycle. I can bring bills down here if you wish to see some. Thank you, Mayor, for the time.
Thanks, Harvey. Any other members of the public that would like to address council? Okay. Moving to consent agenda. Council, this evening, your consent agenda has 4 items on it. Your workshop minutes of June 22nd, 2015. Your council minutes of June 22nd. Your accounts payable claims totaling $373,766.36, and your payroll claims totaling $207,766.29. Council?
Mr. Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that we approve the consent agenda as read.
Hearing no objection, so ordered. Moving to new business. Agenda Bill 35-15, a public hearing on cost of service, sewer cost of service. Mr. Evers.
Thank you, Mayor Guard, Council. I have a short presentation prior to the public hearing being opened. We had the cost of service workshop with FCS Group on June 22nd. At the conclusion of the workshop, based on general consensus to move forward in the process, staff launched a public outreach effort, specifically with businesses that are slated to experience significant increases. Of the 170 plus commercial accounts, we tried to get a hold of and drew the line at the 50 accounts that were slated to see the highest increases. We were able to have face-to-face meetings and additional phone calls, and I'll get into those specifics as we go through the PowerPoint slide deck, just to give more information. So again, real brief, prior to opening the public hearing, an update on the outreach efforts, the feedback that was offered by the commercial customers based on their specific circumstances with the type of businesses or the type of business or services they provide, the recommendations that were made not only from the commercial customers but after staff review, a few of those recommendations for consideration, and a quick example in regards to a sewer sub-meter program. This one specifically is from the City of Seattle, which has been utilizing this type of program for several decades, and then moving towards next steps in the process. So again, we had about 50 phone calls in regards to reaching out to commercial sewer customers. We were able to conduct 22 meetings. Those were sprinkled out throughout the industrial park, the East Street corridor, and the downtown core as well. So again, the outreach effort reinforced the assumption that every business or service provider has different circumstances on how they consume the water, specifically with their business practices and what they produce and how they conduct business on a daily basis. So we found through the interviews over a 2.5-week period that in many cases irrigation was a factor, where a master meter captures all of the flow and irrigation is not broke out to a separate meter to be able to account for that water that's ultimately not making its way to the sanitary sewer or to the wastewater treatment plant. We had that scenario multiple times. Also, production water hauled off-site via vessels, whether that was with delivery trucks or with rail cars or other types of ways to be able to actually take the product off-site and be utilized by a business or service provider. Also, multiple inquiries to evaporation in regards to cooling towers on site, evaporation with processed water, depending on the type of business, and then dust control specifically with operation yards, being able to keep specifically with the conditions we've been experiencing, keeping dust down in their yards as far as where equipment is staged or other materials. And then we've already had a few follow-ups for potential leaks that it just didn't seem to equate with what was projected with their historical consumptions. The owner or business owner didn't think that they were using that much water. It just didn't make sense. So we have had a couple follow-up conversations in regards to that. So the recommendations moving forward in the cost of service project for the sewer utility is to consider installing dedicated irrigation services to be able to meter and account for that water that is ultimately not impacting the collection system, the sanitary sewer collection system, or the wastewater treatment plant. Look at potentially reducing the connection fees. Also create a deduction program or policies to account for water that is not being discharged to the sanitary sewer. So you'll see in the example that's provided, there is a deduction meter program that is utilized by other utilities within the state of Washington. And then work towards streamlining the reporting process. I fielded that question multiple times. How can I report these numbers to you to be able to get the deduction off of my sewer bill with the justification that it's ultimately not impacting the sewer infrastructure? So again, the example from Seattle Public Utilities, they title it a sewer sub-meter program. So it was instituted to make allowances for commercial customers who consume water that doesn't enter the sanitary sewer and ultimately doesn't make its way to the wastewater treatment plant. So the customers, at least in this specific program, this example provided, customers are responsible for the purchase, installation and maintenance, and accuracy. Also had that conversation around potential third party for these meters. Since they're not a public asset, essentially they'd be a private asset. How do we get those calibrated, make sure that they're accurate, and ultimately they account for the water that's not making its way back to the sanitary sewer? And then to receive the sewer reduction, customers must install and maintain sub-meters that meet the requirements or standards of the municipality. That's fairly standard. So the next steps, continue the outreach program to inform the commercial class of what's being proposed inside the sewer utility for these commercial accounts. Additional meetings, if at all possible. We continue the outreach process to try to have face-to-face meetings to go over the specific concerns and circumstances of each business, since every business is unique in its own right. Also exhausting email contacts to be able to further do that outreach process. Ultimately notification letters, website presence, being able to post it up on the city website as well as partner websites as appropriate, and then potentially a utility bill notification. We do have the ability to do a short notification inside the utility bill, even though it's not stuffed in an envelope, it's a trifold. So again, just special thanks again. I know businesses and stakeholders in the community are very busy. Those individuals that sat down with me and walked through the projected impacts. I know your time is very valuable, so I appreciate you sitting down with me and walking through it and asking pointed questions. That helps us in potentially specifically identifying types of mitigation strategies to make sure that it's being a fair and equitable charge as far as the cost of service. And to Megan Morris for helping out with meetings, and Jessica Honnell with the outreach efforts thus far and those continued efforts. With that, the recommended action this evening is to open up the public hearing.
Thank you, Trevor. And with that, I will open the public hearing and ask any members of the public that would like to speak to come forward to the microphone, give your name and address, and the comments that you'd like to make. Good evening, Steve.
Steve Carroll. I'm the owner of Water Care Industrial Services. It's a business down in the industrial park at 3755 Truman. It's been a few weeks ago, Trevor's office emailed my office and asked for an appointment to visit about the new sewer rate plan. And of course, as a business owner, you don't take that sort of a notice as a good omen. And indeed, Trevor came in and explained that that the a plan that was originally packaged by, I think, a consulting company that you folks are working with, would result in some winners and losers. And that rattled me a little bit because I don't gamble, and I don't think I've authorized the city of Washougal to gamble my money. And we went on to discuss I guess the pros and cons of what was proposed. And had a chance to share several ideas with Trevor, and I got to tell you that I'm very pleased to see a lot of those ideas passed on to you folks as recommendations, sub-metering and whatnot, and I appreciate that. It takes the sting out of what at least initially started out as a very sharp point. So I appreciate the consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Good evening, Charlie.
Evening, Mayor. My name is Charlie Bishop, Pendleton Woolen Mills, 2 Pendleton Way in Washougal. And I'd like to echo Steve's comments. Trevor just contacted me Thursday, I think, and sat down with me and went over the cost of rate study and the proposed changes to sewer rates. And our business, well, first of all, I recognize the need to change the rate structure. The rate structure probably was not equitable. We, in fact, were being charged for 262 employees for the last several years, and we just recently went back over 200. We've been down about 180 for a number of years. And so we hadn't really been paying attention to the rate structure. But the new proposed rates will have a significant impact on us, and a lot of our water consumption does get exhausted to the atmosphere from our dryers for drying wools, yarns, and fabrics. We also have a number of evaporative coolers, and we also generate a lot of steam that gets exhausted to the atmosphere. In talking with Trevor, it looks like it would be fairly easy to capture the amount of sewer discharge that we have going back to the city. So I commend Trevor for reaching out to the businesses and for taking the time to really study the impacts of these rates and how you might be able to mitigate them. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Anyone else that would like to speak on the issue? Don't be shy. Good evening, Scott.
Hello there, Sean. Hello there. I'm Scott Moffett, and I live at 31914 Southeast 17th Street. I own the HWF car wash, and as you know, we do use the water there. We recycle our water, and we recycle all the way through the wash. We only use fresh water on the final rinse is the only one. And I have a pit that's 35 feet long, 8 feet deep, and 6 feet wide. And I pump that out, have it pumped out about every 8 weeks. And these rates are going to affect me a lot, awful lot. Right now, what the sewer rates are, they are low, but in next year, 2016, my sewer rates by monthly are going up to $1,048, and 2017 they're going up to 2,105, and on 2018 they're going up to the 3,452. To me, this seems outrageous. I mean, it's, and I have my pit emptied out about 6 times every year, and so I don't think, I think you need to look at that for me also. And I think these sewer rates are way too high, and I'm not very pleased with this at all. Thank you much.
Thank you, Scott. Anyone else that would like to comment? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Robertson, and I live at 2861 West First Street, Washougal. I'm not here about the sewer rates. I am here because I'm concerned about the parking at the Sandy swimming hole. We live in the Lookout Ridge area, and over the past multiple years, we have frequented the Sandy swimming hole. My children love to go. The parking this year, we used to park in a vacant lot, a field that was on the corner of Shepherd and 8th Street. And that has, it's recently been developed. With the heat that we've had early in the season, there have been many, many people. They park on the streets. They park up 8th Street. If I lived on 8th Street, I'd be really sad. I haven't asked them since I tend to park there myself. But it's a terrible hazard. People are walking down the middle of the streets. I've seen mothers with strollers. I've had friends who say that, and none of the cars go 25 miles an hour on Shepherd. It's truly amazing to me that nobody has been hit yet. I was told that Washougal was looking at buying property from a local church and voted against it. I would think that as the city council that you would be proactive in the safety of our community. I have many friends and they love to go down there, but we've hardly been down there because the parking is such a terrible issue. We aren't asking for a community center. We don't even need the spot to be paved. We were perfectly happy with an empty field. But we do need a place to park that is safe for our children. And that is it.
Thank you, Jennifer. Anyone else that would like to comment to council?
Apologize, I'm late.
No, you're fine.
Just got into town yesterday and I had a note on my desk about this meeting and water sewer rates being increased for commercial.
Not your water rates.
What's that?
Not water rates.
Sewer rates. Either way, I was same. So my name is Mike Miller. I own Riverside Laundry on 4th Street. I purchased it 2.5 years ago. Looking at this briefly, like I said, I got this on my desk today when I got back into town. Currently, it looks like I'm a rather large user of the sewer system. About $650 a month's my bill. It looks like, based off the information that was left by the gentleman, my rates will be up to $2,600 a month in the course of 3 years. I don't know if that's correct. Like I said, I'm a little uneducated on it because I just got back into town. That'd be unfortunate. We do a lot of stuff at Riverside. Since I bought it, been able to keep the prices down, never raise the rates. We do Laundry Love, which we team up with a church program. We provide all the soap, free laundry for everybody, do that twice a month. If rates like this were to increase, I couldn't afford to do that. If rates were to increase like this, I don't know that I could afford to keep the place open. For me, it was a complimentary to another business I already owned. We do a wash and fold service that we deliver to other places, home deliveries. But increases like this, I would probably have to either outsource that, not do the laundry here, take it elsewhere, whatever it may be. But I couldn't pass increases like that onto my customers. But the big one I look at, Laundry Love, that's people that they can't afford the laundry themselves anyway, it would go away. I just couldn't do it. So I wish I was more educated on this. Like I said, I just found out about it this morning. So that's my piece. Thank you.
You bet. Mike, just to confirm, you mentioned an 18-year bill go up to 2,600. Is it a month or bi-monthly?
That would be a month. This is, right now, those figures that I gave you, I divide in half because it's bi-monthly. You're right.
Okay, so right now you're at 650 and it'd go to 2,600.
Correct.
Okay.
Based off the figures that were left, and I don't have the gentleman's card. Drop the information off.
Yeah, I was
We
going to say.
haven't got a chance to speak yet. So I think you sat down with Steve Buck, and I was out of town. So look forward to talking to you. Maybe you can educate me on what exactly is going on.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
You bet. Anyone else? Harvey?
Harvey Olson, 3903 R Street. I'm not going to speak on the sewer rates. I am going to restate what I said 4 years ago, approximately 4 years ago, that all major decisions that the council makes should require all 7 members to be there. I don't know if tonight you plan on voting for this, but I'm just bringing that up again, Mayor. It's been 4 years since I brought that up, and nothing was done about saying that all 7 have to be there for major decisions on money or any other item. But I would strongly encourage that something be put in writing that the council does have a full complement before any major decision is made. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Harvey. Anyone else that would like to comment on the issue? Last call. Good evening, Chuck.
Good evening. My name is Chuck Lamb. My residence is 2020 East Street, and I operate a couple of businesses in the area. We do car lots, so we do a lot of washing on the cars and stuff. And it sounds like what we're trying to do. I just got told about this today, so I'm kind of just reading the material and shooting in the dark a little bit. But it sounds like obviously the city's going to have to charge some more money for water that is going into the system. And there's a couple things that I've got questions about. They're mentioning deduction meters to obviously measure how much water is going back into the system. And obviously there's been some letters out and some meetings made that have got some attention from local people that use water in the area. And it's probably scared them a little bit. I heard some of those were just, I mean, if I had to pay that kind of water bill, I probably wouldn't be able to stick around. So I think the city probably needs to investigate a little bit and find out what these meters are going to cost to get installed for these businesses, and advise them on that, and hopefully work with them on being able to put that in their utility bill. And that's just a recommendation I would put before the city as a business owner here, because that looks like where we're going. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. I would definitely touch base with Trevor, because you're certainly one of those that could benefit from that side without the water going back into the sanitary system. Anyone else that would like to address council? Okay, I will close the public hearing, turn the item back to council. We're not, council members, as your agenda bill shows, we're not asking you to make any decisions this evening, but we did want to get through a public hearing and make sure that we did that as part of our process in there. Obviously, there are some things that Trevor and his staff will be looking at and bringing forward as well that may have some positive influence on some of the customers' billings, given their types of businesses. So this will be an item that will come back as well. But council members that have questions either of staff or of folks who are here this evening. Brent?
I've got a few questions, actually more than a few, but what's the cost of sub-metering? What would it cost a business to put in a sub-meter in? And if it's a relatively small benefit? Would it make sense for them to do it?
Yeah, so it alludes to that on Seattle Public Utilities website, that if there's no cost benefit as far as the actual deduction, I mean, as far as critical mass, how much flow is not making its way back to the sanitary sewer, obviously maybe a larger business with higher volume would have more of a vested interest to invest in that deduct meter. So it really depends on the size of the meter, what type of flow it's going to handle, and then the calibration piece of that. So staff will be able to go back and research that further and have a better sense as far as order of magnitude, what type of cost that would be to the business owner, potentially.
How's it actually done? Because if you're having, a water flow that's kind of going off into a parking lot or trucked off out of somewhere else, taken somewhere else, or some other way it doesn't make it or evaporate. In the case of Pendleton, as Mr. Bishop suggested, how would you meter that?
It would be normal application like a water meter, and then that would be deducted off of the sewer flow. So you'd be able to account for water that's either going to atmosphere or going on the lot for washing cars or towards irrigation. You'd actually meter that portion of it and then back that out of the sewer analysis as far as the CCF flow to the sanitary sewer and to the wastewater plant. So either an accounting meter or a deduct meter.
Okay.
And do the appropriate analytics to be able to charge.
It can be done.
Yep.
And you're not actually metering the sewer flow itself, though?
No, so Mr. Bishop had said specifically for his circumstances to be able to potentially monitor flow in manholes. They have 2 large connections at Pendleton Woolen Mills. So setting aside, knowing exactly how it's being consumed on site with cooling towers and evaporation and steam. For his application, it might be a path for us, critical path, to be able to monitor what's actually being discharged to the sewer, which would be flow loggers. And then we'd have a accurate account of what's actually making its way to the sanitary sewer, rather than trying to account for everything that's being consumed on site that's not making its way there.
Then we had Scott Moffett from who at the car wash. Is there a way to deduct his pit? He expressed his concern about the pit that he has the water held in and that being pumped out. Is there a way to deduct that?
Yes, so when I sat down with Mr. Mulfate, we talked about the regeneration system they had on site, and I believe Mr. Lee as well sat in. We didn't talk about the pit with the specifics on that and the cost to be able to vector that, or the waste that's associated with the dirt that's coming off the cars. I assume it's real similar to like our decant facility for cleaning catch basins type of application. But I haven't looked at that facility specifically, but it's something that we could take into consideration, obviously, as a potential mitigation tool.
And my last line of questioning, we have a letter from Killian Pacific that talks about a 670% increase for the Washougal Crossing building and the impact that it would have on retail, certain food-related businesses and that. And we've been aware of that, and there's not much you can do about it, or is there something?
So in sitting down with business owners and stakeholders in the community, up front, I disclose that the analysis that FCS has conducted thus far is pure analytics. So we look at the consumption across the water meter, and the analytics assume that everything is being discharged to the sanitary sewer. So we know, and we knew prior to conducting the outreach effort, that that wasn't the case, that each business was going to be case by case. So specifically for like the Washougal Crossing, with a tenant being Starbucks and Vancouver Clinic and other tenants they have in that specific facility, that there's specific process on site, coffee, other things that are making its way not to the sanitary sewer, but being
being driven off,
being consumed. So that's a factor that plays in.
Yeah.
Theoretically, Brent, they should be able to use that same flow meter that's going out. They've got a lot of water that they're using, but not a lot of water that's going into the, at least at the current moment that they're using it, isn't going to.
Sure, sure. And then we had the discussion from the laundry owner, Mr. Miller. you know, I understand that that a laundry is going to have, you know, a lot going into the sewer system. It's unavoidable. And so my question really is, comparison of our rates that we're proposing to other jurisdictions, and would this be something of a cost that he would likely face at another jurisdiction, or would we be higher, lower, in the same ballpark? Do you have a feel for that?
There might be specific language for that type of waste generation or lack thereof with soap and water, as far as the actual constituency of the wastewater not being as a large of an effect on the sanitary sewer and the wastewater treatment plant. We haven't gotten into those specific characteristics of the wastewater, more of a high-level demands on the system based off of flows, the analytics, and then working with the business owners and the facility owners and tenants to be able to mitigate that. So I could check when we did the comps as far as the unit cost for commercial customers. We had those comps inside of the presentation on June 22nd, being on the lower end of the pack, and with the cost of service, if implemented, or an iteration of it being implemented, would be more middle of the pack. So I could check and see, you know, specifically for laundromat or car wash or different type of service to see if there's municipal code language to address that.
And then I have one, this will be my last question. I have one broader question here, as we are trying to be more equitable here, and we're coming up with ways to be fair to these businesses and actually apply the rates to their actual, what we think, what our best guess is what their actual usage is of the sewer system. And when we start factoring in the sub-metering and other factors, that's actually going to result in a generation of less revenue from the commercial businesses, ultimately. And would that change the FCF study, because we would have to make up for that somewhere, and would the residential rates have to be a little higher than what the FCS study had contemplated?
Yeah, so in working that with FCS Group, our consultant that's assisted us with rates dating back to 2006, early 2007, they referenced the model as being fluid and needing to be augmented on a regular basis, because business owners will do their own mitigation if they're able to do so, unless it's a sunk cost or a sunk use of water that, you know, to be able to survive as a business, you have to consume it and discharge it to the sanitary sewer. But FCS did bring that to our attention, that the projection of revenues inside the utility as a whole in aggregate will have to be monitored closely for us to be able to hit our targets as far as our debt service and all the underlying.
Sure, but my question is, are we going to have to do that? Are we going to have to change these targets now and before these rates are actually implemented to make up for these equitable deductions we're going to provide to commercial businesses?
We'll need to consider that when the ordinance comes before you for consideration, as far as taking that into consideration, and if there is actually contingency based on diminished revenues and what that threshold is for us to not be out of compliance with the underwriting and debt service obligations that we're currently under. So I'll make a note of that and mention it to Finance Director Forsberg.
All right, thank you.
To kind of bring some of this back into perspective for a lot of you, a few years ago, as many of you know, especially if you've lived here or had a business here, we've gone through some significant rate increases on both water and sewer. And one of the reasons I keep pointing out, today we're talking about the sewer side. Our water side, we've stabilized. And quite frankly, our water, the cost for water in the city of Washougal really aren't out of line with other communities and where we should be. The bulk of your bill is for the sanitary sewer system, where it goes once you've used it. This cost of service goes to a little bit more of a comprehensive look at the entire system. And what we were trying to do is not only make sure that on the water side everybody is at some degree, and Harvey, as you alluded earlier, we get it down to what you're using or a little bit less than what you're using that is captured in your bill. And then you pay incrementally for any amounts that you use over that. So literally you'd be paying for what you use. On the sewer side, we needed to look at that side as well, but it also takes into account, in this case, the commercial customers. And unfortunately, and as has been reported in the paper, over the years there are just a whole lot of people that are in a whole lot of different places in regards to what they're billed that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. Some businesses, two businesses doing really the similar things using the same water, the same amounts of water or very close to it. One is in the hundreds of dollars every 2 months and the other is in the thousands of dollars every 2 months. So we're trying to pull some equity into that. As we looked into that issue and tried to tie together the entire cost of service study, we also found out that we're a little bit backwards to a lot of communities. Even our neighbor to the west over in Camas, their industrial and commercial side actually augments and keeps down their residential customers' billings on an every 2 month basis. In the case of Washougal, homeowners and residences are actually paying towards the commercial and the industrial, well, the commercial side. The industrial side we have set up completely separately. So it's been a little bit of a weird one in there where in this case we're trying to bring back into line all of the commercial customers for what your actual impact to the sanitary sewer system is. And as we do that and make it equitable across the way, it actually brings down the sewer costs for residential homes that are now actually underwriting a portion of that. So it, to some degree, and this will sound weird, to some degree we're not really raising the rates. We're adjusting the rates for individual customers and where they should be and what the actual use is. But the way that we get to our rates is over a number of years rate analysis, basically what it costs us to run the system, and then dividing that by the amount of stuff that's going through that system. Same thing for water. We take the estimated cost of running the water system for a 5 or 6 year rate study, and we divide that out by the number of units of water that comes out and is used. So while we're not raising the rates, for some folks their rates are going up, some folks their rates are going down, or their invoices are going up or down just to adjust to that portion. But we've not taken the system on a whole and said we need another $500,000 or $1 million a year to operate the system. We're still operating at the same dollar amounts. It's just readjusting who's paying what to try and get it closer to equitable for what everybody should be having. So in this case, and some of you are great cases in point, obviously, as we've heard, and thank you for the comments on staff's follow-up on your recommendations. This city does not want to charge you for things that you're not using. So if you're using 10,000 gallons every 2 months of water, but you're only discharging 5,000 gallons, we don't want to charge you for 5,000 gallons that isn't going to the sewer system. So if it's happening in other ways, it's helpful for us to know that and try and find some ways to mitigate and adjust those bills accordingly. And that's what staff is doing now, and any information that you can give them is very helpful for that. For some customers, it may not make a difference either way. It may be coming in and it's going out and hitting the system and going from there. But for those things that we can do, we should be doing those and should be making those adjustments. Brent's final question just gets back to the fact that, okay, if we make those adjustments and that costs we basically are not charging $500,000 a year. Now we're in the red $500,000 on the annual operation of the utility itself. So then something has to happen all throughout the system in order for that to be equitable and make sure that it's not in the red, which means a little bit more on everybody's bill to make sure that we're not there. So hopefully that helps for some folks on where we are in this conversation and some of the items that we've been talking about. Paul?
I just wanted to kind of summarize and underline a little bit of that. As Trevor said, we started looking at water rates before I was in council in 2006. And really, that council really didn't do anything about it. There are two pieces. There's the what we call the rate study, which is how much does it actually cost to produce the water or to treat the wastewater. By and large, we dealt with those issues several years ago when we changed water rates, sewer rates, and stormwater rates. The present problem is what's called a cost of service study, where you take all of that amount of money and try to allocate the cost fairly among the users. And what we discovered was that single-family residences were subsidizing a little bit multifamily residences, and that both of them were subsidizing a bit more commercial. And we draw a distinction between commercial and industrial use. Industrial is an entirely different rate structure. Once we started looking within commercial, and there are, what, roughly 90 commercial customers?
170?
Right at 170.
Right at 170. As the mayor said, individual commercial customers with very similar uses were paying vastly different rates, which didn't seem fair. So what we're trying to do is come up with a fair system of allocating wastewater rates, sewer rates, amongst the commercial users so that people aren't subsidizing each other. And that's what we're trying to do, and it's a difficult problem. As you can tell, there were a number of things that we frankly didn't think about when we started playing around with these rates. And so we greatly appreciate having you all come in and tell us what we overlooked so that we can put that in and come up with what really is a fair plan. That's what the goal is here, is a fair rate plan.
Dave?
A lot of detail here, the last two speakers. I'll simplify it for you. When the council looked at this, they gave the administration and the staff two pieces of guidance. One was that customers pay for what they get, and the second one was that no customer class should subsidize another customer class. And that's where we're moving to, and we're not moving all at once. We're doing it a little bit at a time, but that's the guidance that resulted in the current proposal. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Other council comments, questions? Trevor, anything additional from yourself?
No, as I sat down with the commercial customers and business owners in the community, what's been proposed by FCS is a full phase-in, achieving cost of service in 2018. And looking at the spreadsheet, what's been proposed as far as guidance thus far, there's a potential subsidy in 2016 and 17. That was the guidance prior to the outreach effort being kicked off or being initiated. So council, at least proposing at this time, to subsidize the increases for the whole class in 2016 and 2017, utilizing penalty fees from paying charges in a late fashion. And then that was pretty evident in looking at the 2018 impacts for multiple accounts when that proposed subsidy comes off. So that was the one piece I think that was not mentioned tonight.
Joyce?
I think that your information on a sub-meter, if that is possible, is a good way for us to feel like businesses are just being charged for what they put into the system. And is that, as I understand, that's up to the business to provide, or will we provide that?
So I did limited research as far as the deduction or sub-meter program. Seattle Public Utilities, obviously a large utility, largest in the state, has a comprehensive program. That was the first place I started just because it seems like they've got it down to a pretty good science to be able to provide that program. In their program that's provided as an example, that's purchased, installed, and maintained by the business owner, not by the municipality, at least in that example.
I had thought about water going elsewhere, like Starbucks, but I hadn't thought about evaporation in a large amount, and that certainly is a consideration.
Any other items from council?
I have one follow-up question. Did you just look at Seattle's plan, or were there other plans for the sub-metering or how to give businesses credit?
I looked at a couple other plans that weren't quite as comprehensive. They're a little bit more rudimentary. I'm sure they're effective.
Well, have there been some that don't require meters that just kind of, estimate what the...
That's a specific question I asked our finance director in a auditor from the state auditor's office to be able to quantify that. Not that we're not going to get accurate information and data from business owners, but to be able to point towards either a third party or some type of calibration to cover both parties to say, okay, it's been deducted or accounted for. We can go ahead and make that note on the account and make the revisions to the charges. So just general sense, as far as gallons or cubic feet that are either being consumed or not consumed, most of the sub-meter and deduct programs had a little bit more science to it.
But do some avoid the sub-meter, at least in some cases, because I can see some businesses that, that the savings isn't really enough, because these meters cost thousands of dollars, right?
Depends on the application. For a large business with significant flow, it could be a higher dollar meter, but a return on investment.
Of course, they would get a, but for in a smaller situation.
On the flip side, you get the return on investment. So it's really
Right.
that breaking point of, is it worthwhile based on the estimated cost to not only install it but to maintain it for the owner. So those are the type of scenarios we need to work through and bring forward for consideration as far as.
Well, in some cases, they're like manuals you can go to, and that's how we came up with these, theoretically came up with these rates in the first place. There's kind of industry standards of what you'd expect a Starbucks to, how much of it would end up in the sewer and how much of it, there's probably information out there on that without metering it.
Yeah, there was, and a couple business owners had, after requesting the meeting, had already crunched their own numbers and had a pretty strong sense of what was either going towards irrigation or processed water or going on the yard to keep dust down. And so they had a strong sense, but being able to fine tune that as far as reporting and being able to make a note to the file.
It's a huge task, and we're not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
We can't dispense cosmic justice here, but we can do our best.
Be reasonable.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that we're trying to do is keep the number of guesses down as low as we can, because quite frankly, that's what got us into the situation we are now. Somebody that came online 20 years ago that had a business that, well, we think you're kind of going to be in this range, and then somebody 10 years later comes in, well, we think you're going to kind of be in this range, and that's where we got to. So, Dave?
First of all, I appreciate Trevor and his staff reaching out to the customers. Secondly, whenever you do reach out to the customers on a proposal like this, you get feedback which enables you to make a better proposal out of it. The sub-meter proposal that came in is probably an excellent example of that. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of push and pull, tug and that sort of thing about how to do that. But the more feedback we get from you, the better the proposal will end up in the long run. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dave. Any last items from council members? Trevor, what do you see as a timeline for us at this point?
Moving forward, we like to make as much contact with commercial accounts. Again, not looking at the presentations that have been conducted over the last several months of the 170 accounts, the 30 that we targeted, the 50 that we've reached out to, and the top 30 were significant impacts. And looking at the spreadsheets, first blush was very overwhelming for the commercial customer, obviously. The next 50 and 50 below that, we have not reached out to them specifically. So moving forward and notifying them if we can't get a face-to-face meeting, at least being able to email or give them the notification letter with the projections as far as impacts for them to be able to offer feedback. So we haven't talked to the whole class, just the top of the class as far as impacts or proposed impacts. So coming back, most likely early August. I think July 27th is perhaps a little bit too bullish. Coming back with a additional report and recommendations on August 10th would be preferred at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who took the time to be here this evening as well. With that, we'll move on. Thankfully, the next item is public comments. The second and last opportunity for you to comment on items to council, regardless what they have to do with. But if any of you have follow-up questions or suggestions in regard to this issue, certainly take this time to come up to the microphone as well. Steve, you're first again.
Not always. A question for Trevor. With regard to submetering and the types of meters and the calibration requirements that might be expected, should the type of meter and the calibration requirement be any different than those that are currently provided by the city for residential or commercial or industrial customers? And I ask that, I guess, because I'm not aware of any calibration of at least commercial or household meters that's currently done. And it would seem odd to have a higher standard for the submetering that's provided by the private enterprise than would the calibration standards for the meters that the city provides to its customers.
Yeah, so there's a breakout as far as calibration of meters. So the 2-inch meters and up, at least on the water side of the utility, we utilize a third party. We put that out to bid, competitive bid, to be able to get those meters calibrated on an annual basis. And so we have a third party do that. The residential meters and some of the smaller applications for commercial accounts, those are not calibrated on a recurring basis. Industry, I guess, analytics shows that the water meters after installed, if nothing else, will slow down instead of speed up as far as wear and tear on components for that meter. So you bring up a good point in regards to the calibration piece. There is a certain amount of meters that are calibrated in our system, but there's many in our system that are not.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Anyone else? Okay. Moving on to Mayor's report, I actually have nothing for you this evening. Council members. Brent?
I just enjoyed the groundbreaking at the port for the new park there. That was fun and very, very encouraging for the community. That's about it for me.
Paul?
I also enjoyed the groundbreaking at the port. It's been a long time coming. We've been working on that for a long time. One thing I would like to ask staff to work on, particularly our city attorney, is it was striking to read in the Columbian that we did not have the authority to create an emergency ban on fireworks. We need an ordinance, I think, that would allow us to put an emergency ban on fireworks, both sale and use.
And that, as part of the analysis of that, we need to consider whether that's preempted.
We've already, as a municipality, we've already reached out to our legislators to ask them to take action in the next session to make it available for the governor, any fire chief or any fire marshal to make that designation as well in extreme circumstances. So, anything else, Paul?
Given the speed at which the legislature operates, I'd really like to get something for us. We obviously can't do anything for next year because it has to be in place for a year, but for the year after, it would be nice to have that authority. Not so much for the council, but for the fire chief or the marshal or.
Joyce?
I have a couple of things. There's a couple events at the port, the 4th of July, which was marvelous, and then the CDM, the Weird Beer Festival, which was a fundraising for the CDM Senior Care Services. Sitting out there at our port with the music on a lovely summer evening can't be beat. Both were wonderful. I want to talk about the Sandy swimming hole. I live where I can drive by there. Each time I go through the lot, I count the cars from Oregon. This is a neighborhood park. And I talked to Sherry Montgomery today, our code enforcement lady, and she is writing tickets about the parking. We are addressing that, we're aware of it. It's too bad, it's a public nuisance. I mean, it's these people, I asked some people, I said, oh, where are you from? And they said, Portland. And I said, well, why are you at our park? And they said, well, we have friends that come. So I think that's troublesome. We can't keep people from being there, but it is a neighborhood park, and I'm sorry you're having problems there. But we are addressing the parking through ticketing. So I hope that makes an impact.
I would be sad if I get a ticket for parking there.
If you're parking illegally,
I don't park illegally.
then, okay, then you
And I think
won't.
it's inevitable. There will be people that come from Portland, but we that live in Washougal should still be able to have access to that.
Yeah, I know, it's an issue. I mean, it's an issue at Captain Clark Park also.
Even when we had that lot, there would be times there would be over 50 cars in that lot. The parking that's provided there's 16 spots there. It's completely inadequate. They are teeny tiny. You can guarantee you're going to get door dings.
We voted against the council voted against the additional lot across the street because of the cost, and it was going to be 23 more spaces, which again would just be not satisfying the need of the people that are coming in. It would just be another, I mean, it would just be more problems. So that's what we did, and we're hoping the ticketing will begin to start making an impact.
Chris, anything else? Jennifer? David?
Not even double
Okay.
the number of spaces.
I'm going to take an odd departure from our agenda this evening. We do have an executive session in regard to property acquisition with no action to follow. But frankly, that executive session could get a little bit lengthy. So with council's permission.
I move to recess the council meeting.
Thank you very much.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to recess the council meeting to take up the items under the Transportation Benefit District meeting, and then come right back into council meeting. Any council discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So with that, we will recess this meeting. And Rose, are you ready for us to make a switch?